In 1713, after 12 years of bloody war, the British Royal Navy dumped over 36,000 men onto the streets without jobs or prospects. These weren't just any men. They were the most skilled sailors in the world who'd spent years authorized to attack enemy ships as privateers. They knew exactly how to take a vessel by force, and now they were starving. No wonder they started attacking everyone. Before we start, if you're enjoying these historical bedtime stories, hit that subscribe button. I'm curious, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I've got listeners from Tokyo to Toronto falling asleep to these stories. And it never stops being weird to me. Now, make yourself comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket. We're heading to the Caribbean in 1715, and you're going to want to be settled in for this one. Your eyes crack open to the damp, suffocating heat of Nassau in the Bahamas. First thing you notice is the salt-crusted hammock digging into your back, swinging slightly with the gentle movement of the tide against the pilings beneath the weathered shack. The smell hits you next. A pungent mix of unwashed bodies, rum, salt air, and something dead and rotting nearby. Unlike your clean, temperature-controlled bedroom, this place is an assault on your senses. You're not alone. Around you, a dozen men snore and grumble in their sleep, packed into a space barely big enough for half that number. Through gaps in the warped wooden planks, you can see pink dawn light starting to filter across the harbour. Another day in the Republic of Pirates has begun. "Get up, you worthless dogs!" A voice cuts through the humid air. "Tide's coming in, and so are the Spanish. Up!" The voice belongs to Benjamin Hornigold, one of the first men to turn these ruins into a pirate haven, and right now your head is pounding from last night's rum as you try to focus on what he's saying. "Two Spanish merchantmen, loaded down and barely manned," Hornigold continues, kicking at hammocks. "They'll be passing the eastern shoals by noon." The men around you stir to life with surprising speed. In the Royal Navy, it would take threats and the lash to get sailors moving this quickly, but the promise of Spanish plunder, that works better than any whip. You stumble outside, joining the crowd headed toward the beach. Nassau isn't much to look at, just the burned-out shells of buildings overgrown with tropical vegetation. The British abandoned this place years ago after a Franco-Spanish raid, and nature's been reclaiming it ever since. But for men like you, men rejected by civilized society, it's become something unique, a place governed by no king or country. The man walking beside you spits a stream of blackened saliva into the sand. "Heard Teach is going out with Hornigold today," he says to no one in particular. Edward Teach, you've heard stories, tall, broad-shouldered former privateer with a voice that can cut through cannon fire. Not yet the infamous Blackbeard, but already developing a reputation for ferocity and cunning. "Teach knows the Spanish routes better than his own cock," someone laughs. "If he says they're coming, they're coming." As if summoned by his name, you spot Teach striding down to the waterline where 3 large wooden boats wait. Each can hold about 30 men, and they're being provisioned with water barrels, hardtack, and powder for the guns. "Look alive," Teach bellows, his dark beard already grown wild enough to give him his future moniker. "I want us on the water before the sun clears those palms." The organisation is surprising. These are men who've rejected authority, yet they move with practised efficiency. There's a reason for that. Unlike the tales you might have heard, real pirate crews were among the most democratic organisations of their time. Each man had signed the ship's articles, a constitution of sorts, and each had a vote in major decisions. "You joining us?" A hand claps your shoulder, and you turn to find Hornigold himself looking at you expectantly. Before you can answer, someone calls from one of the boats. "Ship coming in from the east flying a white flag." All activity stops. A white flag could mean many things. Surrender, truce, or most likely someone bringing news. Might be Rogers, someone mutters, and a ripple of unease passes through the crowd. Woodes Rogers, the name alone is enough to make pirates nervous. A former privateer himself, Rogers had been appointed by the British Crown to clean up the Caribbean. He'd been offering pardons to pirates who gave up the life and the hangman's noose to those who refused. "Nah, too small," says another voice. "Looks like a sloop. Maybe it's Vane returning." Charles Vane, another pirate captain who'd sailed out weeks ago looking for prizes. If he was returning, it could mean good news or bad. The small vessel tacks into the harbour, and as it draws closer, you can make out figures on deck. The man at the helm is indeed Vane, his distinctive red coat visible even at this distance, but it's the man standing beside him that causes a stir among the pirates. "Is that Bellamy?" someone asks in disbelief. "Black Sam himself," another confirms. Samuel Bellamy, known as Black Sam for his dark hair and the black ribbons he tied it back with, one of the most successful pirates of the age, renowned for taking ships with minimal bloodshed through calculated intimidation. "If Bellamy's here, something big is happening," Hornigold says, his earlier plan apparently forgotten. "Teach, hold the raid. Let's hear what they have to say." As the sloop anchors and a small boat rows towards shore, you can feel the anticipation building. These men, Hornigold, Teach, Vane, Bellamy, are the founders of what will become known as the Flying Gang, the core of Nassau's pirate republic, and whatever has brought them together can't be small. The rowboat grinds against the sand and Vane jumps out, followed by Bellamy and a third man you don't recognise. His clothes are finer than most, with a gentleman's bearing despite the pistols tucked into his belt. "Ben," Vane calls to Hornigold, "you won't believe what we found. This here's Stade Bonner." The gentleman nods stiffly, looking uncomfortable. You've heard of him, the gentleman pirate, a wealthy plantation owner who, for reasons no one quite understood, abandoned his fortune to become a pirate. Most said he was running from a nagging wife, others that he'd gone mad. Whatever the reason, he'd proven himself a terrible captain, barely keeping his crew alive. "Bonnet came with news," Bellamy says, his voice low and intense. "The Spanish treasure fleet wrecked off Florida during the hurricane last month. All 11 galleons driven onto the reefs." A hushed silence falls over the gathering. The Spanish treasure fleet was the stuff of pirate dreams. Galleons laden with gold, silver, and jewels from the New World mines, making their annual voyage back to Spain. And now they were saying it had wrecked? "The Spaniards have salvage operations going," Vane continues, excitement evident in his voice. "They've already recovered millions in silver, but there's more. Bonnet here says they've got 350,000 pieces of 8 sitting in a guardhouse on shore, waiting for transport. Guarded by only 60 men." The implications sink in slowly, then all at once. A fortune beyond imagining, relatively lightly guarded, ripe for the taking. "I figure 5 ships, 300 men," Bellamy says, looking around at the gathered pirates. "We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we're rich men." Hornigold's face shows he's already calculating the risks and rewards. The Spanish will come after us with everything they've got. "Let them try," Teach growls, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of such a prize. "By the time they organise a response, we'll be scattered to the winds." You can feel the energy shift among the pirates. This isn't just another raid on a merchant vessel. This is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. We put it to a vote, Hornigold declares, adhering to the pirate code, all in favour of postponing our current venture and joining forces for this Spanish treasure. The response is unanimous, a forest of hands shooting into the air. Even yours goes up, caught in the moment. Then it's settled, Hornigold nods. We sail with the evening tide. Teach, you'll take command of the Revenge with Bonnet. Vane, you and Bellamy will lead the second and third ships. I'll take the remaining two. As the captains begin organising their crews, dividing supplies and weapons, the beach erupts into a flurry of activity. The typical pirate raid was a small affair, a single ship attacking a merchant vessel, taking what they could carry and disappearing. But this was warfare. You! Teach points at you suddenly. You sailed with the Royal Navy, didn't you? I can tell by the way you stand. Ever fired a swivel gun? Before you can answer, he continues, doesn't matter, you will today. Report to the Revenge and tell Scudder I sent you. And just like that, you're drafted into one of the most ambitious pirate operations of the era. As you make your way toward the docks where the larger ships are moored, you can't help but marvel at how quickly life can change. Yesterday, you were just another unemployed sailor drinking away your troubles. Today, you're about to sail with Blackbeard himself to steal Spanish treasure. The Revenge is a sleek brigantine captured from a Spanish merchant months earlier. As you climb aboard, the organised chaos is striking. Men are loading cannons, checking weapons, storing provisions. There's none of the flogging or shouting you'd expect on a naval vessel. These men work efficiently because they want to, because they have a stake in the outcome. Scudder, you ask a nearby sailor, who points toward a barrel-chested man inspecting a rack of muskets. Teach sent me, you explain when you reach him. Said something about a swivel gun. Scudder looks you over with a critical eye. Navy man, eh? Good. The swivels need a steady hand. They're smaller than ship's cannons but deadly at close range. We mount them on the rails, use them to clear enemy decks before boarding. He leads you to a collection of small cannons, each about 3 feet long and mounted on a swivelling base. These beauties fire grape shot, he explains, patting one affectionately. Dozens of small iron balls that spread out like a shotgun blast. One discharge can drop 20 men. Your job will be to man one during the approach, target their officers first, cut off the head, and the body dies. The casual way he discusses killing is jarring, but then again, this is the reality of pirate life. For all their democratic principles and relative freedoms, pirates were still criminals, murderers, and thieves. The romantic notion of swashbuckling heroes existed only in stories told long after they were gone. By nightfall, the pirate fleet is ready to sail. 5 ships, 300 men bound for the Florida coast and Spanish treasure. As the Revenge clears Nassau Harbor, you stand at the rail watching the ramshackle collection of huts and ruined buildings recede into the darkness. First big raid? A voice asks, and you turn to find a young man barely out of his teens standing beside you. You nod, and he grins, revealing several missing teeth. Name's Israel Hands, he introduces himself. Been with Teach for 6 months now. Best captain I ever sailed with. What makes him so good, you ask, curious. Hands looks thoughtful. He understands fear, not just feeling it, using it. Most captains try to win fights with guns and steel. Teach wins them before they start. As if on cue, Teach emerges from below decks, instantly commanding attention. In the weeks you've known him, you've noticed how he's been cultivating his appearance, growing his beard longer, wilder. "Tomorrow we face the Spanish," he announces, his voice carrying across the deck. "They outnumber us, but they fear us, and rightly so." He paces the deck, making eye contact with each man. "When we sight the guardhouse, we'll see their fear. When we land on their shores, we'll smell their fear. And when we count our silver, we'll taste their fear." A cheer goes up from the crew, and you find yourself joining in despite the grim subject matter. There's something magnetic about Teach, something that makes men willing to follow him into danger. The night passes slowly as the pirate fleet makes its way south. You try to sleep in your hammock below decks, but the excitement and anxiety keep you awake. Around you, men snore or whisper, sharing stories of previous raids or what they'll do with their share of the treasure. "Gonna buy me a tavern in Port Royal," one man declares. "Serve rum to sailors and retire fat and happy." "Fool's dream," another counters. "You'll drink away your share before we even reach Jamaica." "What about you?" someone asks in your direction. "What'll you do with your cut?" It's a question you haven't considered. Like most men who turn to piracy, you'd been focused on survival, not planning for wealth. The question hangs unanswered as exhaustion finally pulls you into sleep. Dawn breaks with a shout from the crow's nest. Land ho, Florida coast, dead ahead. You scramble topside with the rest of the crew, straining to see the shoreline. Through the morning mist, you can make out a long, flat coastline and the darker shapes of what must be the shipwrecks. Even from this distance, the devastation is apparent. The splintered remains of proud galleons scattered across the reefs and beaches. Teach stands at the bow, spyglass to his eye. "There," he says, pointing, "the guardhouse, just as Bonnet described." Following his direction, you can just make out a wooden structure on the beach, surrounded by tents and the small figures of men. "They've seen us," Hornigold calls from his ship, which has pulled alongside. Spanish flag going up. Indeed, a flag rises above the guardhouse, the red and gold of Spain, a defiant statement against the approaching pirates. "Run up the black," Teach orders, and moments later the Revenge's own flag unfurls from the masthead, a black field bearing the image of a skeleton stabbing a heart, the early version of what would become Blackbeard's famous banner. The other pirate ships follow suit, each raising their own variations of the black flag. It's an awesome sight. 5 pirate vessels bearing down on the Spanish position, black flags snapping in the wind. "Hands, take us in closer," Teach commands. "Gunners, prepare to provide covering fire. Boarding parties, stand ready." The Revenge creeps closer to shore, careful of the same treacherous reefs that claimed the Spanish galleons. Through your spyglass, you can see panic among the Spanish guards. Some are rushing to man small cannons, others forming defensive lines on the beach. "Hold steady," Teach cautions as the first Spanish cannon fires, the ball splashing harmlessly in the water ahead of your ship. They're nervous, making mistakes. The pirates' response is more measured. When the ships are within range, Teach gives the order, and the first broadside tears into the Spanish position. The aim isn't to destroy, the silver is too valuable to risk, but to create confusion and fear. "Boarding parties, to the boats," Teach roars over the cannon fire. "Swivel gunners, provide coverage." You take your position at one of the swivel guns, watching as men pour into the longboats alongside the ship. Teach himself jumps into the lead boat, sword already drawn. As the boarding parties row toward shore, the Spanish fire becomes more desperate. Musket balls zip past, cannons boom, but the pirates press on. When they're halfway to the beach, Teach stands up in his boat, a reckless, dramatic gesture, and pulls out a bottle. He removes the cork with his teeth, then stuffs a lit fuse into the neck. "What the hell is he doing?" someone beside you mutters. The answer comes when Teach hurls the bottle toward the Spanish position. It arcs through the air, trailing smoke before smashing against the guardhouse wall. Flames erupt instantly, a primitive grenade but effective. In the confusion that follows, the pirates land on the beach and charge. The fighting is brief but intense, the Spanish guards overwhelmed by the ferocity of the attack. From your position on the ship, you can see Teach in the thick of it, his wild beard making him unmistakable even at a distance. Within an hour, it's over. The Spanish flag comes down and the black flag rises over the guardhouse. The pirates have won, and with minimal casualties, 3 dead, a dozen wounded, against nearly 20 Spanish dead and the rest captured. As the longboats return to the ships, laden with heavy chests, the extent of the victory becomes clear. 350,000 pieces of 8, just as Bonnet had said, a fortune that would make these men rich beyond their wildest dreams. "We've done it," Israel Hands says beside you, his young face flushed with excitement. "We've actually done it." That night, the pirate fleet anchors offshore, too wary of Spanish reinforcements to linger long on the beach. The treasure is divided according to the articles. Larger shares for the captains and officers, but every man getting a portion that would have taken years to earn through honest work. As rum flows and men celebrate, you find yourself sitting apart, contemplating the chest of silver coins now stowed in your sea bag. It feels unreal, this sudden wealth, and with it comes a question: what next? Teach settles beside you, his own celebration apparently complete. "Heavy thoughts for a victory night," he observes, just wondering what happens now. You admit. Teach stares out at the dark water, the moonlight catching in his beard. "We return to Nassau, strengthen our position. The world's changing, friend. The war's over, and the great powers are turning their attention back to the colonies, to men like us. You think they'll come for Nassau? Eventually." Teach nods. "Men like Woodes Rogers won't allow a pirate republic to thrive, but we'll be ready, and in the meantime," he grins, raising his rum bottle, "we'll live as free men." As Teach rejoins the celebration, you're left with a new understanding of this pivotal moment. This raid isn't just about Spanish silver, it's the beginning of something larger, the true rise of the Pirate Republic of Nassau, a bold experiment in outlaw democracy that would soon draw the full attention of the British Empire. Little do any of you know that this very raid will set in motion the events that will eventually lead to both the golden age of piracy and its downfall. For now, though, there is only the night, the rum, and the heady feeling of freedom that comes with being beholden to no king or country, only to each other and the articles you've signed. The Pirate Republic has announced itself to the world, and the world will soon answer. The morning light streams through cracks in the weathered planks of a Nassau tavern. Your eyes struggle to adjust as the pounding in your skull reminds you of last night's celebration. Silver coins, your share from the Spanish raid, still jingle in the pouch at your waist. It's 1716. And the Pirate Republic is flourishing. "Wake up, you bastard," a voice growls. "Teach wants to see you." You peel your face off the sticky wooden table. The speaker is Israel Hands, now Teach's trusted quartermaster. The boy has aged years in just a few months, his once smooth face now bearing a scar across the cheek and the hardened look of a man who's seen blood spilled. "Now," you manage to croak. "Right fucking now," Hands confirms. He's at the docks. Your mouth tastes like something died in it. Worse, it probably did. The water in Nassau is so brackish and foul that most pirates drink only rum or beer, safer than risking the dysentery that kills more sailors than cannonballs ever will. Outside, Nassau has transformed. What was once a collection of ramshackle huts among ruins has become a booming pirate settlement. Taverns, brothels, and supply stores have sprung up to serve the hundreds of pirates who now call this place home. The successful raid on the Spanish salvage operation brought more than just wealth, it brought reputation, and with it, more recruits. You find Teach at the end of the newly constructed pier, supervising the loading of a sloop, but something's different about him. The beard that once just marked him as unkempt has been allowed to grow wild, spreading across his chest like a black mane. There he is, Teach turns, grinning through that forest of hair. My favourite gunner. You wanted to see me? Got a proposition for you, Teach says, lowering his voice. Hornigold and I are parting ways. This catches you off guard. Benjamin Hornigold and Edward Teach had been inseparable since founding the Pirate Republic, their partnership the bedrock of Nassau's strength. What happened, you ask, unable to hide your surprise. Teach gestures for you to follow him aboard the sloop. Philosophical differences, he explains once you're out of earshot of the dock workers. Ben refuses to attack English ships, says it violates his privateer commission. But the war's over, you point out. The commission's worthless. Exactly, Teach nods. I say a ship's a ship. Gold is gold, no matter what flag it flies under. Half the crew agrees with me. You begin to see where this is going. You're splitting the crew. Already done, Teach confirms. Vote was taken last night while you were face down in your cups. I'm taking this sloop and 40 men going hunting. And you want me to come along? Teach's dark eyes glint with something dangerous. You're handy with a swivel gun, good in a fight, don't talk too much. What do you say? It's not really a question. In the unwritten code of the Pirate Republic, refusing such an offer could be seen as an insult. Besides, your silver is dwindling fast in Nassau's taverns and brothels. When do we sail, you ask? Teach's grin widens. High tide, 2 hours. You spend those 2 hours gathering your meagre possessions and saying goodbye to the few friends you've made in Nassau. One of them, a former Royal Navy gunner named Matthews, gives you a worried look. Teach is changing, he warns. Something's happened to him these past months. He's not the same man who sailed with Hornigold. How so? Matthews lowers his voice. He's developing a reputation. Cultivating it like, saw him practicing with slow matches in his beard yesterday, standing in front of a mirror, seeing how it looked. You think back to the wild-haired man on the dock. It's just for show, surely. Maybe, Matthews doesn't sound convinced. But there's talk of ships taken where no survivors were left to tell the tale. Before you can press him further, a bell rings from the harbour, the signal for Teach's crew to board. You heft your sea bag and give Matthews a final nod. If I don't come back, you tell him, drink a toast to me, to all of us, Matthews replies grimly. The sloop, renamed the Adventure, slips out of Nassau harbour with the tide. It's a small vessel compared to the Revenge, but faster, more manoeuvrable, perfect for stalking merchant ships in the shallow waters around the Bahamas. Teach gathers the crew on deck once Nassau disappears behind the horizon. Even in the bright Caribbean sun, there's something foreboding about him now. He's dressed all in black, pistols strapped across his chest, cutlass at his hip. We sail as equals, he announces, bound by the articles we've all signed. Each man gets a vote, each man gets a share, but at sea, my word is law. No one challenges this seeming contradiction. In pirate democracy, the captain's authority during battle was absolute, necessary for survival. It was only in matters of overall strategy, punishment, and prize-taking that the crew's votes held sway. Our hunting grounds will be the shipping lanes between here and the Carolina coast, Teach continues. Rich pickings but dangerous waters. The Royal Navy patrols there, and the colonial governors are offering bounties for our heads. A murmur runs through the crew. This is significantly more risk than they faced raiding Spanish ships in the safety of the Caribbean. Higher risk means higher reward. Teach raises his voice over the muttering. I mean to make us all rich men, or dead ones. He says this last part with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes, and something cold settles in your stomach. This isn't the Edward Teach who recruited you in Nassau months ago. This is someone new, someone darker. The first 2 weeks at sea bring no prizes, only dwindling supplies and growing tension. The crew begins to grumble about Teach's leadership, questioning his decision to leave the relatively safe waters of the Bahamas. Then, at dawn on the 16th day, the lookout spot sails on the horizon. Merchant vessel, Teach confirms through his spyglass. Dutch flight by the look of her, heading north toward the colonies. The crew springs into action with practiced efficiency. Gun crews check their weapons, boarders sharpen cutlasses and load pistols. Teach disappears into his cabin, emerging minutes later transformed. This is the first time you see what will become his infamous trademark. He's tucked slow-burning matches under his hat and woven them into his beard. Sulphurous smoke wreathes his face, giving him a demonic appearance. His eyes seem to glow within the cloud. What the hell? Someone whispers beside you. Terror, Teach replies, somehow hearing the whisper from across the deck. Terror is a weapon more powerful than any cannon. He strides to the bow as the Adventure closes on the Dutch vessel, which is now clearly trying to outrun you. A futile effort given the sloop's superior speed. Run up the black, Teach orders, and the pirate flag is hoisted, no longer Hornigold standard, but a new design, a skeleton stabbing a heart while holding an hourglass. The message is clear, your time is running out. As you close on the merchant ship, Teach does something unexpected. He takes 2 lit matches and places them in his mouth, biting down so they stick out like fiery fangs. Combined with the smoke from his beard, the effect is terrifying, a devil risen from the depths. Fire a warning shot, he commands, his voice muffled but still authoritative. The bow gun roars, sending a ball across the merchant's bow. The Dutch ship immediately begins lowering its sails in surrender. No fight? Someone complains, disappointed. Teach removes the matches from his mouth and grins. That's the point. Terror wins battles without bloodshed. Remember that. The taking of the Dutch fleet goes smoothly. The crew, already demoralized by the fearsome appearance of the pirate captain, offers no resistance. Cargo is transferred, valuables collected, and the ship itself is left intact. Another departure from Hornigold's approach, who would often burn captures to eliminate witnesses. Why not sink her? You ask Hans as the Adventure pulls away, leaving the stripped Dutch vessel wallowing in the waves. Captain has new methods, Hans explains. Let them live, let them talk, spread the legend. The legend of Blackbeard, Hans says, using the name for the first time, a name that will soon strike fear throughout the Caribbean and beyond. Over the next 3 months, Blackbeard captures 8 more merchant vessels using the same tactics. Each time, his appearance grows more terrifying, more matches in the beard, more weapons strapped to his body, his voice dropping to an inhuman growl when addressing victims. And each time he lets survivors go, ensuring his reputation spreads. Soon, ships are surrendering at the mere sight of his flag on the horizon. The legend is working. By winter, the adventure returns to Nassau laden with plunder, sugar, molasses, cocoa, tobacco, and enough coin to make every crew member wealthy. But Teach, now universally called Blackbeard, seems unsatisfied. "We need a larger vessel," he announces to the crew as Nassau comes into view. "Something with more guns, more presence." "The adventures served us well," argues the boatswain, a cautious man named Fletcher. "Fast, manoeuvrable." "And small," Blackbeard counters. "The prizes are getting larger, better armed. We need to match them." The debate continues after you've docked, spilling into Nassau's taverns. The Pirate Republic has grown even more in your absence, with several new captains establishing themselves. Charles Vane has returned with significant plunder. Samuel Bellamy has acquired a new ship. Even Stade Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, has achieved some success. But none draw attention like Blackbeard when he strides through town, matches smouldering in his beard even when not in battle, the theatrical becoming the habitual. You're drinking with hands when a messenger bursts into the tavern. "Spanish galleons spotted off the western shoals," he announces, heavily armed but flying a merchant flag. The tavern erupts in excitement. Spanish galleons, even merchant ones, were the ultimate prize, far larger and richer than the vessels Blackbeard had been taking. "Too big for us," Fletcher argues when Blackbeard immediately begins gathering his crew. "The adventure doesn't have enough guns." "We'll coordinate with Vane," Blackbeard decides. "His ship plus ours gives us enough firepower." Charles Vane, a notoriously prickly captain with his own fearsome reputation, surprisingly agrees to the joint venture. Perhaps he too recognizes that neither ship alone could take such a prize. By midnight, both pirate vessels are slipping out of Nassau Harbour, guided by the light of a full moon. The plan is simple. Catch the galleon at dawn when the watch changes and vigilance is lowest. As predicted, you sight the Spanish ship just as the first light breaks over the horizon. It's an impressive vessel, three-masted with at least 30 gun ports visible. "That's no merchant," Fletcher mutters beside you. "That's a warship flying false colours." Before anyone can act on this observation, Blackbeard orders the attack. The Adventure and Vane's ship, the Ranger, approach from different angles, hoping to catch the galleon in a crossfire. What happens next is chaos. The Spanish vessel suddenly comes alive, gun ports opening along both sides. It was indeed a trap, a Spanish naval frigate disguised as a merchant, specifically hunting pirates. "Hard to port," Blackbeard roars as the first Spanish broadside tears through the water where you would have been. "Return fire." The Adventure's guns seem pathetically small against the frigate's armament, but Blackbeard's crew fires with disciplined precision, targeting the enemy's rudder and rigging rather than attempting to penetrate her thick hull. Vane's ship takes a direct hit, its foremast splintering and collapsing in a tangle of ropes and canvas. The Ranger begins to drift, unable to maintain position in the battle. "We're on our own," Hans shouts over the cannon fire. "Orders?" Blackbeard's face, even through the smoke of battle and his own smouldering beard, shows no fear. "Closer," he commands. "Get us alongside." "Alongside?" Fletcher protests. "They'll blow us out of the water. Their guns can't depress enough if we're directly against their hull." Blackbeard explains with eerie calm. "Get us in their blind spot." It's a desperate gamble, but with the Ranger crippled and the Adventure outgunned, there are few options. The helmsman guides your sloop directly toward the massive Spanish vessel, enduring another broadside that tears through your rigging but miraculously leaves the hull intact. Then you're there, snugged up against the frigate's towering wooden wall. Just as Blackbeard predicted, their guns can't be lowered enough to hit you, and the Spanish crew's attempts to fire muskets down at your deck are met with a withering response from your own marksmen. "Grappling hooks," Blackbeard orders. Prepare to board. It seems insane. You're 40 men against what must be at least 100 Spanish sailors, but Blackbeard is already leading by example, grabbing a hook and throwing it upward to catch on the frigate's rail. Are we really doing this? Someone asks in disbelief. Would you rather stay here and drown? Hans retorts, grabbing his own grappling hook. What follows is the most desperate fight you've ever experienced. The initial boarding is a brutal exchange of pistol fire, followed by hand-to-hand combat with cutlasses, knives, and boarding axes. The Spanish have numbers, but the pirates have ferocity born of desperation. And they have Blackbeard. The captain is everywhere at once, his beard still smouldering, pistols barking, cutlass slashing. He seems to have transformed completely into the devil he pretends to be, roaring with each swing of his blade, laughing when Spanish shot tears through his coat. He's not human, a Spanish officer gasps before you cut him down. The fighting continues for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. Slowly, the tide turns. Spanish sailors begin throwing down their weapons, some even jumping overboard rather than face the demonic pirate captain and his crew. When the Spanish captain finally surrenders his sword, the frigate is yours. The cost has been high, 12 pirates dead, most of the rest wounded, but the prize is beyond imagination. The ship was carrying military payroll bound for Havana, over 100,000 pieces of 8. A gift from God, Blackbeard declares, standing blood-spattered on the quarterdeck of his new flagship. Or perhaps from the devil. The frigate, renamed the Revenge in honour of Blackbeard's first command with Hornigold, is sailed back to Nassau alongside the damaged Adventure and the limping Ranger. Your arrival causes a sensation. Never before has a Spanish naval vessel been captured by pirates. The victory cements Blackbeard's position as Nassau's preeminent captain. Even Benjamin Hornigold, still clinging to his refusal to attack English ships, must acknowledge his former protégé's achievement. In the weeks that follow, the Revenge is refitted according to Blackbeard's specifications. Additional gun ports are cut into her hull, bringing her armament to 40 cannons, a floating fortress that could challenge any colonial warship. We're not just taking prizes anymore, Blackbeard announces to his expanded crew, now numbering over 100 men. We're establishing dominance. The Caribbean will be ours. Some of the older pirates exchange worried glances at this declaration. Piracy had always been about survival and wealth, not territorial control. Blackbeard's ambitions seem to be growing beyond the simple life of taking prizes. Your own concerns are validated when Blackbeard summons his officers to his cabin one evening. The space has been transformed to match its new occupant. Black drapes over the windows, weapons mounted on every wall, and a massive oak desk that must have been looted from some governor's mansion. Gentlemen, Blackbeard begins once everyone is seated, our success has brought unwanted attention. The governors of Virginia, South Carolina, and the Bahamas have all issued proclamations against us. Bounties have been placed on our heads. Nothing new there. Hans shrugs. Pirates have always been hunted. Not like this. Blackbeard slides a paper across the desk. £500 for me, dead or alive, 100 for each of you, the largest bounties ever offered for pirates. The numbers are sobering. £500 is a fortune, enough to tempt even the most loyal crewmate. Additionally, Blackbeard continues, I have information that Woodes Rogers has been appointed governor of the Bahamas with explicit instructions to eliminate the pirate presence in Nassau. This news sends a ripple of concern through the cabin. Rogers was a formidable opponent, a former privateer himself who understood pirate tactics and had the full backing of the British Crown. So what's the plan? Fletcher asks, voicing what everyone is thinking. Abandon Nassau? Find a new base? Blackbeard's smile is cold. No, we negotiate. Negotiate? You can't help but ask. With who? With the governor of North Carolina, Blackbeard reveals. Charles Eden. I've already sent a messenger. Eden is open to an arrangement. The implication is clear. While some colonial governors were incorruptible crusaders against piracy, others were willing to turn a blind eye in exchange for a share of the plunder. Apparently, Governor Eden fell into the latter category. He offers us safe harbour, protection from bounty hunters, and legitimate trading papers, Blackbeard explains. In return, we share our prizes and restrict our activities to non-English shipping. So we'd be privateers again, Fletcher observes, just like Hornigold wanted, with one crucial difference, Blackbeard corrects. We choose our targets, not the crown, and we keep the majority of what we take. The proposition is discussed late into the night. Some, like Fletcher, argue it's a trap. Others see it as the best chance for long-term survival in an increasingly hostile Caribbean. In the end, as always in pirate democracy, it comes down to a vote, and by a narrow margin, the crew decides to accept Governor Eden's offer. 2 days later, the Revenge sets sail from Nassau, not as raiders this time, but as emissaries. The pirate republic you helped build is being left behind, perhaps temporarily, perhaps forever. As Nassau disappears over the horizon, you find Blackbeard at the stern, staring back at the island. Having second thoughts, Captain? You ask. Blackbeard strokes his infamous beard, now permanently stained with gunpowder. Nassau was always doomed, he says quietly. A dream that couldn't last. Rogers will come with warships and hangmen, and it will end. And what about us? Will North Carolina last? Blackbeard turns to face you, and for a moment you see something of the old Edward Teach in his eyes, the calculating, pragmatic sailor who survived by adapting. Nothing lasts in our profession, he says, but this buys us time, and time, my friend, is the only true currency. As the Revenge sets course for North Carolina and an uncertain alliance with Governor Eden, you can't help but feel you're witnessing a turning point, not just for Blackbeard and his crew, but for the entire golden age of piracy. The days of the wild, ungoverned freedom of Nassau are numbered. The age of negotiation, compromise, and eventual defeat has begun. But Blackbeard, it seems, is determined to delay that defeat as long as possible, even if it means becoming something he once despised. An agent of government, however corrupt. What none of you realize as you sail north is that Blackbeard's most infamous exploits, the ones that will cement his legend for centuries to come, still lie ahead, and so does the betrayal that will ultimately end his reign as the most feared pirate of the Caribbean. North Carolina, November 1717. You wake to the gentle rocking of the Revenge, anchored in the calm waters of Ocracoke Inlet. 6 months have passed since your departure from Nassau, and life under Governor Eden's protection has been comfortable, too comfortable for some. The arrangement with Eden has worked exactly as Blackbeard promised. The governor provides legitimate trading papers, turning a blind eye to the decidedly illegitimate cargo that flows through his colony. In return, he receives a generous percentage of the profits and expensive gifts that keep his loyalty secure. But something's been off with Blackbeard lately. The fire that drove him to capture the Spanish frigate seems dimmed. He spends more time in his cabin with charts and logbooks than on deck with the men. The legend he worked so hard to build is beginning to feel like just that. A legend, not a living force. You're not the only one who's noticed. Whispers of discontent ripple through the crew. Pirates aren't meant for this half-legitimate existence, this bureaucratic dance of falsified papers and governors' dinners. They signed on for freedom and fortune, not becoming smugglers and tax evaders. Man coming aboard. The shout interrupts your thoughts. A small boat approaches from shore, bearing a familiar figure, Israel Hans, returning from a visit to the mainland. Hans climbs aboard, his expression grim as he heads straight for the captain's cabin. Something's happened. You follow, close enough to hear, but not to intrude. The door to Blackbeard's cabin remains partly open, voices drifting out. Woods Rogers has taken Nassau, Hans reports without preamble. Offered pardons to any pirate who surrendered. Hornigold accepted. Ben always was practical. Blackbeard's voice reveals no surprise. How many others? Most of them. Jennings, Burgess, even Vane at first, though rumour says he later changed his mind and escaped. A heavy silence follows. Nassau fallen without a fight. The pirate republic snuffed out by the mere offer of forgiveness. You think of the ramshackle settlement you helped build, now under the firm control of British law. There's more, Hans continues reluctantly. Rogers sent word to all colonial governors. The king's pardon is being offered everywhere. Surrender and receive amnesty, or be hunted down without mercy. Eden won't turn on us, Blackbeard says, but there's a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Maybe not, but his superiors might force his hand. And with Nassau gone, where would we run if things sour here? You've heard enough. Slipping away before they notice you, you head for the forecastle where some of the crew are dicing. Their carefree laughter feels disconnected from the gravity of what you've just learned. That evening, Blackbeard calls the entire crew on deck. His appearance has changed again. The beard grown even wilder, streaked now with grey despite his relatively young age. The smouldering matches are absent, but something in his eyes burns hotter than any physical flame. Men, our situation has changed, he announces without preamble. Nassau has fallen. The king's pardon is being offered throughout the colonies. Murmurs spread through the assembled pirates. For many, this news is both shocking and tempting. A pardon means a chance to return to society, to walk free without the constant fear of the noose. Some of you may be considering this offer, Blackbeard continues, his voice hardening. I won't stop any man who wishes to leave. Take your share and go with my blessing. He pauses, eyes scanning the crowd. But know this, the pardon is a lie. The moment piracy is no longer convenient for the crown, they'll find reasons to revoke your amnesty, to hang you anyway. It's persuasive, and he knows his men. Most have no skills for legitimate life, no place in the rigid society they've rejected. For them, the pardon offers an uncertain future at best. I offer an alternative, Blackbeard's voice drops, forcing the men to lean in. Not retreat, not surrender, but a bold, new venture. One final, glorious campaign that will secure our fortunes forever. You can see the spark reigniting in the crew, the hunger for something beyond the tedious safety of North Carolina. What do you propose, Captain? Fletcher asks, voicing the collective curiosity. Blackbeard's smile is wolfish. First, we need a proper flagship. The Revenge is formidable, but she's known to every Navy captain in the Atlantic. We need something new, something unexpected. He unrolls a chart on a barrel top. French shipping routes, he explains, jabbing a finger at a line stretching from Africa to the Caribbean, specifically slave ships, large, well-built vessels designed for ocean crossings and carrying valuable cargo. Some of the crew shift uncomfortably. Even among pirates, there were lines many preferred not to cross. Interfering with the slave trade wasn't about moral objections. Few Europeans of the era questioned the practice, but about the practical dangers. Slave ships were disease-ridden and their human cargo complicated any capture. "I'm not proposing we become slavers," Blackbeard clarifies, reading the room. "Just that we take one of their ships. The French vessel La Concorde will be passing through these waters within the month. 300 tons, 26 guns, and built like a fortress." She's perfect. "The French won't give her up easily," someone points out. "They won't have a choice," Blackbeard counters. "Besides, their crew will be weakened after the Atlantic crossing, half their men dead or ill from tropical disease, the rest exhausted. The plan is put to a vote, as all major decisions are in a pirate crew. Despite some reservations, it passes overwhelmingly. After months of comfortable stagnation, the prospect of action, of returning to true piracy, is too appealing to resist. 3 weeks later, you're standing at the rail of the Revenge as the lookout calls down from the crow's nest. Sail-ho French colours coming from the southeast. Through your spyglass, you can make out the distinctive profile of a large merchant vessel, La Concorde, right on schedule. She's running slow, her sails not fully deployed despite favourable winds, a sign that her crew is indeed undermanned, just as Blackbeard predicted. "Battle stations," Blackbeard orders, though there's little urgency in his voice. This won't be much of a battle. As the Revenge approaches, you can see the French crew scrambling to prepare what defence they can, but their movements are sluggish, disorganised. When Blackbeard runs up his black flag, you can practically feel their morale collapsing. The Revenge fires a single warning shot across La Concorde's bow. It's enough. The French captain strikes his colours without firing a single cannon in defence. The boarding is anticlimactic. No dramatic swing across on ropes, no fierce hand-to-hand combat. You simply pull alongside and walk across planks laid between the vessels. The French crew, gaunt from disease and malnourishment, offer no resistance. Below decks, the reason for their condition becomes clear. The stench hits you like a physical blow. Hundreds of enslaved Africans chained in the hold, packed so tightly they can barely move. Disease has run rampant among them too, with dozens already dead or dying. "Jesus Christ," mutters the man beside you, pulling his kerchief over his nose. Even hardened pirates are taken aback by the conditions. Blackbeard's decision is swift and unexpected. "Release them," he orders, pointing to the surviving captives. "Give them the smallest sloop from our flotilla. Let the French captain take his human cargo to shore." It's not mercy motivating this decision, but practicality. Blackbeard has no use for slaves, and keeping them aboard would only spread disease to his own crew. Better to be rid of the problem entirely. While the transfer takes place, you help explore La Concorde. She's everything Blackbeard promised. Sturdy construction, good armament, and spacious. The ship's carpenter, examining her hull, whistles appreciatively. "She'll take additional gun ports easily," he notes. "Could mount 40 cannons without stressing her frame." By nightfall, the French crew and their human cargo are gone, given the smallest vessel in your flotilla, a backhanded mercy that at least offers them a chance at survival. La Concorde is yours. Blackbeard wastes no time making the ship his own. The French captain's cabin is cleared out and Blackbeard's own distinctive possessions brought aboard. The black drapes, the arsenal of weapons, the oak desk. The ship herself is rechristened in a ceremony involving liberal amounts of rum. "I name this vessel Queen Anne's Revenge," Blackbeard declares, smashing a bottle against her hull. The name is significant, Queen Anne's War being the conflict that first employed many of you as privateers, the war whose end launched the current wave of piracy. There's another meaning too, one Blackbeard doesn't articulate but you all understand. It's a declaration of intent against the new British monarch, King George III, Queen Anne's Revenge, vengeance for the broken promises and discarded sailors of the previous ruler's war. The transformation of La Concorde into Queen Anne's Revenge takes weeks. Additional gun ports are cut into her hull. The interior is reconfigured to accommodate a larger crew. Even the figurehead is replaced. The French merchant carving swapped for a grinning skeleton holding an hourglass. During this time, Blackbeard recruits heavily, expanding his force beyond the original crew of the Revenge. By the time the work is complete, he commands 4 ships and over 300 men, the largest pirate fleet since Henry Morgan's buccaneers decades earlier. Life aboard Queen Anne's Revenge quickly settles into its own rhythm. Unlike naval vessels with their strict hierarchy and brutal discipline, pirate ships operated as floating democracies, at least when not in battle. The day begins at dawn with the changing of the watch. Those coming off duty collapse into hammocks strung below decks, while those starting their shift emerge bleary-eyed into the morning light. Breakfast is hardtack, rock-hard biscuits that must be soaked in beer or water to be edible, and salt pork boiled in a copper kettle. "Weevils again," grumbles Fletcher, breaking open his biscuit to reveal the tiny insects that inevitably infested ship's bread. "Extra protein," someone jokes. The morning is spent on essential maintenance, scrubbing the deck, checking rigging, mending sails. Pirates might be rebels against society, but they know a neglected ship is a death sentence. Every man pulls his weight in these tasks, even those who were officers or specialists during battle. Around midday comes the main meal, usually bean soup with whatever meat is still edible from the stores. On good days, there might be fish caught from the rail. On bad ones, the meat is so heavily salted or spoiled that even hardened sailors struggle to keep it down. Afternoons bring weapons practice. Unlike the myth of pirates being untrained rabble, Blackbeard's crew drills regularly with cannons and small arms. The gun crews can reload and fire in under 2 minutes. Not as fast as a navy vessel, but respectable. Again, Hans orders when one team fumbles their ramrod. "Too slow and we're all dead." Evenings, if no prey is being pursued, bring the closest thing to leisure. Men gather on deck to smoke, dice, or share stories. Music is common, fiddles, pipes, and sea shanties sung with varying degrees of talent. Blackbeard himself rarely participates in these gatherings anymore, preferring to study charts in his cabin or confer with his officers. "He's planning something big," you overhear one pirate telling another. "Bigger than anything we've done before." The rumour proves true a week later when Blackbeard summons his officers and senior crew. Spread across his table is a chart of the Carolina coast, with one port circled prominently, Charleston. "Gentlemen, our target," Blackbeard announces, tapping the circle. The richest port in British North America. The audacity of it takes your breath away. Charleston isn't some isolated plantation or passing merchant vessel. It's a major colonial hub defended by forts and militia. "You're proposing we sack the entire city?" Fletcher asks, incredulous. "Not sack it," Blackbeard corrects. "Blockade it, hold it hostage." He explains his plan. Queen Anne's Revenge and the 3 smaller vessels will seal off Charleston Harbour. No ships in or out. The city's commerce strangled until they meet his demands. "What demands?" someone asks. "A chest of medicine," Blackbeard answers, to everyone's surprise. "Several of our men are suffering from venereal disease. Charleston has the only apothecary in the colonies with the necessary remedies." It seems like an oddly modest demand for such an ambitious operation, but no one questions it openly. Perhaps it's just the excuse, not the true motivation. Perhaps Blackbeard wants to prove it can be done, to cement his legend with one magnificent gesture. Whatever the reason, the blockade begins in May 1718. Queen Anne's Revenge, now armed with 40 guns and crewed by over 100 men, takes position at the mouth of Charleston Harbour. The smaller vessels patrol nearby, stopping any ship that attempts to enter or leave. The effect is immediate and devastating. Charleston, dependent on maritime trade, begins to suffocate. Food prices soar. Merchants face ruin as their goods sit unsold on the docks. The colonial government scrambles to mount a defence, but their few militia vessels are no match for Queen Anne's Revenge. On the third day, your lookout spots a well-appointed merchant ship attempting to slip past the blockade before dawn. It's quickly intercepted and boarded. The passengers include something unexpected: prominent Charleston citizens, including a council member named Samuel Wragg. When Wragg is brought before Blackbeard, the pirate captain's eyes light up with malicious inspiration. "Perfect," he murmurs. "The perfect messenger." Wragg, terrified but maintaining his dignity, is informed of his new role. He will return to Charleston with Blackbeard's demands: a chest of medical supplies delivered within 48 hours, or the hostages will be executed and the blockade will continue indefinitely. "You're bluffing," Wragg dares to say. "Pirates don't typically kill valuable hostages." Blackbeard's response is chilling. He draws his pistol and shoots one of the other captives, not fatally, but a serious wound to the leg. The man screams, collapsing to the deck. "That man will likely lose his leg," Blackbeard tells the horrified Wragg. "The next will lose his life. Do I seem to be bluffing?" Wragg is sent ashore in a small boat, carrying both the wounded hostage and Blackbeard's demands. The rest of the captives remain aboard Queen Anne's Revenge, locked in the hold that once housed slaves, an irony not lost on the more thoughtful pirates. Will he really kill them? You ask Hans privately as you stand watch that night. Hans shrugs. Does it matter? They don't know either way. Fear works better than actual violence. Captain taught me that. The next day passes with no response from Charleston. Blackbeard paces the quarterdeck, periodically training his spyglass on the harbour. The hostages, brought on deck for air, sit huddled against the mainmast, watching their captor with wary eyes. "He's different now," Fletcher observes quietly, standing beside you at the rail. "Colder, more calculating." "He was always calculating," you counter. "That's how he's survived this long." Fletcher shakes his head. "Not like this. Before, it was about freedom, about building something. Now it's just about him, about the legend." Before you can respond, a shout comes from the lookout. "Boat approaching white flag." The messenger has returned. A small rowboat approaches Queen Anne's Revenge, bearing not just Wragg but several containers, the demanded medical supplies. Charleston has capitulated completely. Their governing council, unable to mount an effective defence and unwilling to sacrifice prominent citizens, has met Blackbeard's demands without reservation. As the supplies are brought aboard and inspected, Blackbeard's satisfaction is palpable. Not just for the medicines, which are indeed needed, but for what this represents. He has humbled a major British colonial port with nothing more than his reputation and a few well-placed ships. "Release the hostages," he orders magnanimously, playing the role of the reasonable victor. All except Wragg. He stays until we're safely away. The captives, expecting execution despite the ransom being paid, can hardly believe their fortune. They're lowered into boats and sent toward Charleston, their relief visible even at a distance. "Now what?" Hans asks once they're gone. "The blockade worked. Do we push for more?" Blackbeard considers this briefly, then shakes his head. No, we've made our point. Time to disappear before they organize a proper response. By nightfall, the pirate fleet has vanished from Charleston waters, leaving the humiliated port to recover. Rag is released on a small barrier island, given enough supplies to survive until rescue, but far enough from civilization to ensure the pirates' clean escape. The victory should feel triumphant, but there's an odd mood aboard Queen Anne's Revenge as you sail north. It's been too easy, the greatest achievement of Blackbeard's career, and it was accomplished without firing a single broadside in anger. It doesn't seem right, a gunner named Collis comments as you help him secure the cannons that were never used. Blockading civilians, threatening merchants, not what I signed on for. And what did you sign on for, you ask? Piracy was never noble work. Collis shrugs. Fair fights against those who could defend themselves. Spanish treasure ships, armed merchantmen, not this. His discomfort is shared by others, you realize. There's a growing sense that something fundamental has changed, not just in Blackbeard, but in the nature of your enterprise. The line between pirate and terrorist has blurred. That night, anchored in a secluded cove far from Charleston, Blackbeard holds a celebration to mark their victory. Rum flows freely, and spirits gradually lift as the implications are temporarily drowned in alcohol. You find yourself standing apart, watching Blackbeard at the center of a group of admirers. He's regaling them with an embellished account of Rag's terror, his smouldering beard adding dramatic effect to the tale. Considering retirement, Fletcher appears beside you, offering a cup of rum. You accept the drink. Just thinking, what happens next? You heard the captain. We head back to North Carolina, enjoy Eden's protection a while longer. And then, Nassau's gone. The King's pardon is being offered everywhere. How long before Eden faces pressure to turn on us? Fletcher doesn't have an answer. And neither do you. But as you watch Blackbeard holding court, something becomes clear. He knows the end is coming. The blockade of Charleston wasn't just about medicine or proving a point. It was about cementing his legacy before the inevitable fall. For now, though, Queen Anne's Revenge sails on, her black flag a symbol of the last gasp of the golden age of piracy. The hunters are closing in, but Blackbeard seems determined to give them a chase worthy of his legend. What none of you can know as you celebrate this hollow victory is how soon that legend will meet its bloody conclusion. Or that the most remarkable chapter in the story of piracy is unfolding elsewhere, with two women who are rewriting the rules of a man's profession. While Blackbeard terrorized the Carolina coast, another legend was taking shape in the turquoise waters around the Bahamas, a legend that defied every convention of the pirate world and the world at large. The tavern is called the Spyglass, a weathered wooden structure on New Providence Island that somehow survived Woodes Rogers's purge of Nassau. The place reeks of spilled rum, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar musty odour that permeates all Caribbean buildings in the wet season. You've been drowning your sorrows here since your narrow escape from Queen Anne's Revenge. Jumping ship in North Carolina after the Charleston blockade left a sour taste in your mouth. You weren't the only one to abandon Blackbeard. Fletcher and a dozen others also slipped away, sensing the captain's growing recklessness would lead to disaster. News trickled down to Nassau confirming your instincts. Blackbeard had run Queen Anne's Revenge aground near Beaufort, possibly deliberately. The great ship now sits broken on a sandbar, her captain having escaped with the best men and most valuable plunder on a smaller sloop. Another? The barmaid interrupts your thoughts, gesturing at your empty cup. She's attractive in a hard-edged way, with auburn hair pulled back severely and eyes that miss nothing. Something about her seems vaguely familiar, though you can't place where you might have seen her before. Can't afford it, you admit. Your share from Blackbeard's crew is nearly gone, and legitimate work is scarce in Nassau these days. Roger's administration has driven most pirates away, replacing them with merchants and farmers ill-disposed to hiring former outlaws. The woman studies you for a moment, then paws anyway. On the house, she says, her accent revealing Irish origins. You sailed with Teach, didn't you? Your hand instinctively moves toward your pistol, admitting former associations with notorious pirates could still be dangerous, even in Nassau. Relax, she says, noticing the movement. Half the men in here are former pirates. Rogers may have taken the island, but he can't change what it was. What it still is, beneath the surface. You relax slightly, accepting the drink. I left before the end, you clarify. After Charleston. Smart move, she nods. Heard he lost the Queen Anne soon after, running from the Navy, some say. And who'd you sail with, you ask, turning the question back on her. A cryptic smile plays across her lips. Who says I sailed at all? Before you can respond, the tavern door bangs open. A flamboyantly dressed man strides in, his coat a riot of calico patches that give him his nickname, Calico Jack Rackham, a pirate captain of middling reputation who'd accepted the king's pardon only to return to piracy months later. "Anne!" he bellows cheerfully. "Cast off, darling, we've got a tide to catch." The barmaid, Anne, gives you one last enigmatic look before sauntering over to Rackham. To your astonishment, she kisses him full on the mouth, then begins issuing orders to several rough-looking men who've entered behind him. "That's Anne Bonny," mutters a voice beside you. Fletcher has materialized on the adjacent stool, his own cup already empty. Rackham's woman. Rumour says she sailed with him on raids. A woman pirate? You scoff. That's just tavern talk. Fletcher shrugs. Maybe, but I've heard she's handier with a cutlass than most men, and she's got a temper that'd make Blackbeard think twice. You watch as Anne and Rackham exit the tavern, her arm wrapped possessively around his waist. There's something in her bearing, a confidence, a deadliness that makes you reconsider your skepticism. 2 weeks later, you're on the docks when Rackham's sloop returns to Nassau. Despite Roger's rule, certain captains still manage to operate from the island through bribes and careful timing of their arrivals and departures. Rackham is one of these, having cultivated useful contacts among the new administration. The sloop's crew disembarks, their faces showing the satisfied look of men returning from a successful venture. Among them, to your shock, is Anne Bonny, but not as the captain's woman staying safely aboard during battle. She's dressed in men's clothing, a cutlass at her hip and pistol tucked into her belt. Her hair is still long but now bound under a scarf, and her hands bear the calluses of someone who works the ropes and guns. "Told you," Fletcher says, appearing at your elbow. She's one of them, fights alongside the men. As if sensing your stare, Anne turns. Her eyes lock with yours across the dock, recognition flaring. Then she deliberately places her hand on her pistol, a clear warning to keep quiet about what you've seen. That night, curiosity draws you back to the spyglass. Rackham and his crew are celebrating their successful raid. Apparently, they'd taken a Spanish mercantile vessel off Cuba, a small prize but valuable enough to keep them supplied for months. Anne is back in women's clothing, moving among the tables, serving drinks as if she'd never left. The transformation is remarkable, from fearsome pirate to barmaid and back again. You wonder how many other patrons know her secret. "She wasn't the first, you know," says a voice at your table. You look up to find Fletcher again, this time accompanied by an older sailor named Matthews, the same who'd warned you about Blackbeard's changing nature months ago. "First what?" you ask, though you know exactly what he means. First woman to go pirating, Matthews elaborates. There was Mary Red before her, served in the British Army disguised as a man, then turned privateer, then pirate, whole life pretending to be something she wasn't. Old stories, you dismiss, though you're intrigued. Not so old, Matthews insists. Word is she's sailing these waters now, still dressed as a man, most not knowing any different. If she's so well disguised, you challenge, how would anyone know? Matthews grins, revealing several missing teeth. Because, lad, the most interesting part of the story is yet to come. He leans forward conspiratorially. Rackham took a new crewman last month. Young fellow, keeps to himself. Good fighter, they say. Very good. Almost as if he'd spent a lifetime proving himself. The implication is clear, and your eyes automatically scan the tavern, looking for someone who might fit the description. Your gaze settles on a solitary figure in the corner, slight of build but wiry cropped hair, features that could be described as delicate for a man, but not remarkably so. That's Mark, Fletcher confirms, following your gaze. The one Matthews means. The person called Mark sits alone, nursing a single drink, watching the room with alert eyes. There's something in that watchfulness that reminds you of Anne, the same wariness, the same readiness for danger. So you're saying, you begin, not saying anything definite. Matthews cuts you off. Just telling stories, interesting stories about interesting people. The conversation moves to other topics, but you find your attention repeatedly drawn to the corner where Mark sits, and to Anne Bonny, moving confidently among the rowdy pirates, occasionally exchanging glances with Rackham that speak of genuine affection. A week passes. You've found temporary work repairing fishing boats, humble labour compared to your pirating days, but it keeps starvation at bay. One evening, returning from the boatyard, you take a shortcut through an alley behind the spyglass and stumble upon a scene that freezes you in place. Anne Bonny has a man pinned against the wall, her knife at his throat. The man is whimpering, blood already trickling from a cut on his cheek. Say it again, Anne hisses, her Irish accent thickened by rage. Say what you called me to my face this time. I'm sorry, the man gasps. I didn't mean to call me Rackham's whore. The knife presses deeper. Didn't mean to say I'm only aboard for his amusement. You should leave, should pretend you've seen nothing, but something keeps you rooted to the spot. Perhaps it's the fury in Anne's eyes, not just anger at an insult, but the accumulated rage of a lifetime being underestimated and dismissed. Please, the man begs. I was drunk. I didn't. Problem here. Another voice enters the scene. Mark stands at the alley's entrance, hand resting casually on a pistol. Anne's eyes flick toward the newcomer, then back to her captive. Just educating this gentleman on proper manners. Mark moves closer, studying the terrified man with cold detachment. Education's important, he agrees, voice surprisingly soft. But so is discretion. Rogers's men patrol after sunset. For a moment it seems Anne might ignore the warning and finish what she started. Then, with visible effort, she releases the man, who slides down the wall gasping. Spread the word, Anne tells him as he scrambles away. Any man who thinks I'm aboard for decoration is welcome to test his theory against my steel. Only when the man has disappeared does Anne notice you standing in the shadows. Her knife comes up again. But Mark puts a restraining hand on her arm. He's Teacher's man, Mark says. The gunner who jumped ship. He's not a threat. You step forward, hands raised to show you mean no harm. I saw nothing, you assure them. And if I had, I'd say he deserved whatever he got. Anne studies you suspiciously, then slowly lowers the knife. Smart answer, she concedes. Now go. You obey, continuing down the alley, but not before hearing Mark's next words to Anne. "You need to be more careful. We both do." The exchange confirms what Matthews suggested. Mark is indeed Mary Reid, another woman disguised as a man, another female pirate defying the strictures of society, and somehow, against all odds, two such extraordinary women have found themselves on the same small pirate vessel. The next day, curiosity and perhaps a certain recklessness lead you to the docks where Rackham's sloop is moored. The William, she's called, named after a previous prize. She's a modest vessel, perhaps 60 feet long, with 10 small cannons and room for a crew of 30 at most. Nothing like the floating fortress that was Queen Anne's Revenge, but nimble and fast, ideal for quick raids and quicker escapes. You're examining her lines when a shadow falls across you. Turning, you find yourself face to face with Calico Jack Rackham himself. Up close, he's less impressive than his reputation suggests. Of medium height and build, his most distinctive feature being his elaborate coat and the array of pistols strapped across his chest. "Admiring my lady?" he asks, gesturing toward the sloop. "She's a fine vessel," you acknowledge. "Good lines. Quick, I'd wager." "Quick enough to outrun anything in these waters," Rackham boasts. "Not that running's my preferred strategy." There's a moment of awkward silence before he continues, more directly. "Anne says you're handy with a swivel gun, sailed with Blackbeard before he lost his mind." The statement catches you off guard. "I was adequate," you admit cautiously. "Left his service some time ago." "Smart move," Rackham nods. "Man was bound for a bad end. Too much legend, not enough sense." He pauses, studying you. "I'm short a gunner. Last one lost an argument with a Spanish musket ball. The offer is unexpected, but not unwelcome. Your funds are dwindling and boat repair pays poorly. Still, you hesitate, remembering your last disastrous experience with piracy. "I've got a good crew," Rackham continues, sensing your reluctance. "Disciplined, democratic, we vote on targets, split shares fairly. And women aboard," you say before you can stop yourself. "I've heard stories." Instead of anger, Rackham's face shows amusement. "Ah, so you know about Anne. Yes, she sails with us, fights better than most men I've commanded." He leans closer. "And if you've heard about Anne, perhaps you've heard other stories too. All I'll say is this. On my ship, I judge by ability, not by what's between your legs." It's as close to a confirmation about Mary Reid as you're likely to get. More importantly, it speaks to Rackham's character, unconventional certainly, but perhaps more fair-minded than most captains of the age. "When do you sail?" you ask. Decision made. 3 days, Rackham replies, with a satisfied smile. "Be aboard by dawn, or we leave without you." Those 3 days pass quickly as you gather what meagre possessions you own and settle your affairs in Nassau. Fletcher, hearing of your new berth, warns you against it. Rackham's small time, he argues, takes prizes that barely keep his crew fed, and having women aboard... He shakes his head. "It's unnatural. Bad luck." You think of Anne's knife at that man's throat, the cold competence in her eyes. "I'll take my chances," you tell him. Dawn of the 3rd day finds you on the dock, sea bag over your shoulder. The William's crew is already busy preparing to sail, coiling ropes and stowing supplies. Anne is among them, back in men's clothing, working alongside the others without special treatment. Mark, or Mary, though you'll never use that name aloud without invitation, is at the bow, checking the forward gun. You note how the other sailors give her a respectful berth, suggesting her skills have already been demonstrated convincingly. Rackham welcomes you aboard with a flask of rum, a traditional pirate greeting, and assigns you to the starboard swivel gun, your specialty. By the time the sun clears the horizon, the William is slipping out of Nassau Harbour, bound for the shipping lanes between Cuba and Florida. Life aboard the William proves different from your experience on Blackbeard's vessels. The crew is smaller, creating a certain intimacy impossible on larger ships. Everyone knows everyone else's business, shares the same hardships, celebrates the same small victories. Rackham proves a capable captain, if not a brilliant one. He lacks Blackbeard's flair for the dramatic or his strategic genius, but he's fair, listens to his crew's input, and knows the Caribbean waters intimately. His relationship with Anne is obvious to all. They make no attempt to hide their affection, sharing the captain's small cabin openly. Mary Read's secret is more closely guarded. To most of the crew, she remains Mark, a skilled fighter with a mysterious past. Only Rackham, Anne, and perhaps one or two others know the truth. You never acknowledge it directly, but occasionally you catch Mary watching you as if assessing whether you've figured it out. The William takes several small prizes in the weeks that follow, coastal traders mostly, carrying sugar, tobacco or rum between the islands. The hauls are modest but consistent, keeping the crew paid and supplied without attracting too much attention from the authorities. It's during the third such engagement that you witness firsthand why Anne and Mary have earned their place among the crew. The target is a Dutch merchant vessel, slightly larger than the William but lightly armed. When it becomes clear the Dutch captain intends to resist, Rackham orders a boarding action. As grappling hooks are thrown and pirates swarm across, Anne and Mary are at the forefront. Anne fights with a controlled fury, her cutlass slicing through the air with deadly precision. Mary is more methodical, almost surgical in her movements, each strike calculated for maximum effect. The Dutch sailors, initially confident in repelling the smaller pirate crew, falter when confronted with these two anomalies, women fighting with the skill and ferocity of seasoned warriors. One large Dutchman, recovering from his shock, lunges at Anne from behind while she's engaged with another opponent. "Anne back!" Mary shouts, her voice rising above the din of battle. Anne drops to one knee without hesitation, allowing Mary's thrown knife to sail over her head and bury itself in the Dutchman's chest. The coordination between them is flawless, suggesting a bond beyond mere crewmates. The Dutch vessel is taken with minimal casualties on either side. As the crew secures prisoners and begins transferring cargo, you find yourself standing beside Mary at the rail, both catching your breath after the exertion of battle. "Nice throw," you comment, nodding toward her now retrieved knife. "Nice shot," she returns, referencing your own contribution, a well-timed swivel gun blast that had cleared a section of the Dutch rail at a crucial moment. There's a moment of silent understanding between you, acknowledgement of skills respected, secrets kept. Then Mary straightens, resuming the slightly stiff posture that helps disguise her true gender. "Best get back to work," she says, voice dropping to its customary lower register. "Still plenty to do before we head back to Nassau." As Mary walks away, you notice Anne watching the exchange from across the deck, her expression unreadable. There's something in her gaze, not jealousy exactly, but a fierce protectiveness. Whatever the relationship between these two extraordinary women, it's complex and deep. That evening, as the William sails homeward with her modest prize in tow, Rackham breaks out a special reserve of rum to celebrate. The mood is jubilant, men singing and telling increasingly exaggerated versions of the day's battle. Anne joins you at the rail, away from the main celebration. Unlike Mary, she makes no attempt to disguise her femininity once the fighting is done, her hair loose around her shoulders in the evening breeze. "You're wondering about us," she says without preamble, "about Mary and me." You start at the direct use of Mary's true name, the first time you've heard it spoken aloud on the ship. "I'm wondering about a lot of things," you admit, "but it's not my business." Anne laughs, a surprisingly melodious sound. Smart man, most can't help but pry, especially about two women in a man's world. She looks toward where Mary sits, still in character as Mark, engaging in the crew's celebration with measured participation. We found each other when everyone else would have us be something we're not, Anne continues, her voice softening. Mary spent her whole life pretending to be a man because the world gave her no choice. I refused to be just some man's wife or whore because the world said that's all I could be. She turns to face you directly. You sailed with Blackbeard, the great legend. Tell me, in all his fearsome glory, did he ever have to prove himself the way we do every single day? The question hangs in the air between you, unanswerable, because the answer is so obvious. Blackbeard, for all his carefully cultivated terror, had the natural advantage of being born male in a man's profession. These women have had to be twice as deadly, twice as fierce, just to earn a place on deck. I didn't think so, Anne says, reading your silence correctly. She pushes away from the rail. We'll reach Nassau tomorrow. Rackham plans to stay only long enough to sell our prize and resupply. Then we're bound for Cuba. Richer targets there. I'll be ready, you assure her. Anne studies you one last time. Good. Mary thinks you're trustworthy. I'm not entirely convinced, but I respect her judgment. With that parting shot, she rejoins the celebration, sliding naturally into place beside Rackham. You remain at the rail, contemplating what you've witnessed. In Blackbeard, you saw the end of something, the last spectacular flare of the golden age of piracy, burning bright but doomed to extinguish. In Anne Bonny and Mary Red, you see something different. Not an end, but a defiance, a refusal to accept the limitations imposed by society or circumstance. Their story, you sense, is still unfolding, and whatever happens next, it will be remarkable. What you cannot know as the William sails through the moonlit Caribbean night is how soon that story will reach its own dramatic climax, or that the fate awaiting these pirate queens will be both more merciful and more tragic than anyone could predict. October 1718. The air over Ocracoke Inlet hangs heavy and still like the calm before a hurricane. You stand at the bow of the William, watching the North Carolina coastline shimmer in the distance. 6 months have passed since you joined Rackham's crew, 6 months of moderate success and relative safety, but the world around you is changing. Ship coming in, Mary calls down from her position in the rigging. She's still maintaining her Mark persona, though among the core crew her secret is an open one now. Sloop, moving fast. Rackham emerges from his cabin, spyglass already in hand. Colours? None yet, Mary answers. But her lines look familiar. The approaching vessel grows larger and recognition dawns across Rackham's face. It's the Adventure, he says quietly. Israel Hand's ship. The name sends a chill through you. Israel Hands, once Blackbeard's trusted quartermaster, now captain of his own small sloop. The two of you had sailed together under Teach, and while not friends, there was a certain understanding between you. Think he's hunting us? Anne asks, appearing at Rackham's side, her hand resting casually on her pistol. If he were, he wouldn't approach so openly, Rackham reasons. No, he's bringing news. The Adventure draws alongside, and Hands himself calls across the narrowing gap between vessels. Permission to come aboard, Captain Rackham. Granted, Rackham responds after a moment's consideration, but come alone. Minutes later, Hands stands on the William's deck, his young face now weathered by sun and worry. His eyes widen briefly when he spots you, but he offers a curt nod of recognition before turning to Rackham. Teach is dead, he announces without preamble. The words land like physical blows. Whatever your complicated feelings about your former captain, Blackbeard had seemed immortal somehow, the embodiment of piracy itself. How? Rackham demands, voicing the question in everyone's mind. Han's expression darkens. Lieutenant Maynard of the Royal Navy, Governor Spotswood of Virginia sent him with 2 sloops specifically to hunt Teach down. The crew gathers closer as Hans recounts the tale, how Blackbeard had been hiding in Ocracoke Inlet, how Maynard had approached under false colours, and how the ensuing battle had become the stuff of instant legend. Teach boarded Maynard's sloop thinking he'd already won. Hans explains, his voice hollow with the memory. But Maynard had hidden most of his men below decks. They swarmed out and surrounded the captain. And Teach surrendered? Someone asks incredulously. Hans barks a harsh laugh. Blackbeard? Surrender? No. He fought like a demon, broke Maynard's sword with a bare hand, took 20 cutlass wounds and 5 pistol shots before he fell. A respectful silence follows this recounting. Say what you will about Edward Teach's methods or madness. He died as he lived, defiantly, dramatically, cementing his legend with his final breath. After he fell, Hans continues, Maynard took his head, hung it from the bowsprit as a warning to other pirates. Anne makes a disgusted sound. Barbaric. That's not all, Hans says, his eyes now scanning the gathered crew. Spotswood has declared open season on all pirates. The new governor's offering huge bounties, £500 for captains, £100 for officers. Nothing new there, Rackham dismisses with forced casualness. Pirates have always been hunted. Not like this, Hans insists. They're coordinating now. Royal Navy, colonial governors, even privateer hunters specifically commissioned to track us down. The old havens are gone or watched. Nassau, Tortuga, Port Royal, nowhere's safe anymore. You glance at Rackham, seeing the calculation behind his eyes. The William has been operating in a grey area, taking prizes but keeping a low profile, bribing officials when necessary. But if the hunting season has truly intensified, as Hans suggests, such half measures may no longer suffice. What about you? Rackham asks Hans. Why aren't you running? A shadow crosses the young captain's face. I'm done with piracy, taking the king's pardon while it's still being offered. Thought you might want to consider the same. Rackham bristles visibly at the suggestion. I took the pardon once before, found the honest life didn't suit me. Your choice, Hans shrugs. But things are different now. The golden age is ending, Jack. Teach was the greatest of us, and they took his head like it was nothing. After Hans departs, an uneasy mood settles over the William. The crew breaks into small groups, discussing the news in hushed tones. Even Anne seems subdued, her usual fierce confidence temporarily dimmed. You find Mary alone at the stern, staring out at the adventure as it disappears over the horizon. You knew him, didn't you? She asks, without turning. Blackbeard. Sailed with him. For a time, you acknowledge. Before Charleston. What was he really like, behind the legend? You consider the question, trying to separate the man from the myth he'd so carefully constructed. Calculating, always calculating, every action designed for maximum effect, but there was something genuine in him too. A true belief in the pirate's way, freedom from authority, governance by consent, equal shares in risk and reward. Mary nods slowly, and now they've killed him for it. They killed him because he challenged them too openly, you correct, made himself too big a target. Mary finally turns to face you, her eyes hard with resolve. Is that what we should do then? Make ourselves small? Hide in the shadows? Before you can answer, Rackham's voice cuts across the deck, summoning the crew. Whatever private deliberations he's had with Anne have reached a conclusion. And now the pirate democracy will have its say. "Or men," Rackham begins once all are assembled. "You've heard the news. Blackbeard is dead. The authorities are closing in. Each of you has a choice to make." He paces the deck, calico coat flapping in the breeze that's finally begun to stir. "I've never been one to dictate another man's fate. So, I'm offering 3 options." He holds up one finger. "First, any who wish to take the king's pardon may do so. We'll put you ashore at the next port with your fair share." A second finger joins the first. "Second, those who wish to continue with me must understand we're changing course. No more half measures. We head south to the Spanish Main, where the hunting is still good and British authority still weak." The third finger rises. "Or third, we part ways here. I buy out your shares and you find another birth or another life entirely." Anne stands at his side, arms crossed, watching the crew's reactions carefully. Mary remains slightly apart, her posture giving nothing away about her own preference. "We vote in 1 hour, Rackham concludes. "Consider carefully, for there's no going back from this choice." The hour that follows is filled with intense discussion throughout the ship. Some crew members argue passionately for the pardon, citing Blackbeard's fate as evidence that continued piracy means certain death. Others advocate following Rackham to Spanish waters, believing the reward's worth the risk. You find yourself uncommitted, weighing options as you check the lashings on your swivel gun, a task that has become almost meditative over the months. "Already decided?" Anne's voice startles you from your thoughts. "Still considering," you admit. She settles against the rail beside you, watching your hands work with practiced efficiency. "Jack needs good men," she says after a moment. "Men he can trust." "And women?" you ask, the question slipping out before you can reconsider. Instead of offence, Anne's face shows amusement. "Especially women. We're the only ones with sense most days." You can't help but smile at that. How much danger are we really in? Honestly? Anne's expression sobers. "More than Jack's letting on. We've gotten word from Nassau. Rogers is specifically looking for us, for me and Mary in particular." "Why? You're hardly the most notorious pirates on the sea." "Because we're women," Anne says simply. "The British authorities can tolerate pirates. They've been dealing with them for a century. But female pirates? We're an abomination in their eyes, a threat to the natural order." Her words ring with bitter truth. In a world structured around rigid gender roles, Anne Bonny and Mary Red represent something far more dangerous than mere theft or violence. They represent the possibility that those very roles are arbitrary, artificial. "So, what will you do?" you ask, though you already suspect the answer. Anne straightens, her hand falling instinctively to the hilt of her cutlass. "Fight, of course. It's what I've always done." When the hour expires, the crew reassembles. Rackham stands before them, Anne and Mary flanking him like sentinels. "Time to choose," he announces. "Those for the pardon, step to the port rail." 8 men move, roughly a quarter of the crew. Their faces show a mixture of relief and shame. Those who wish to leave with their shares step to the starboard rail. 3 more separate themselves. The remaining 2/3 of the crew, yourself included, stay centered, declaring their loyalty to Rackham without words. Rackham nods, showing neither judgment nor surprise at the division. "So be it. We'll make port at Eleuthera tomorrow. Those departing will receive their due and will continue south afterward." The decision made, the William's course is set, both literally and figuratively. Those who have chosen to remain seem to embrace a fatalistic camaraderie, celebrating what might be their last days of freedom with gambling, music, and liberal amounts of rum. Eleuthera comes into view the next morning, a slender island in the Bahamas chain with several small settlements ideal for discreet transactions. The William anchors in a sheltered cove, and preparations begin for the crew's fragmentation. As shares are calculated and possessions gathered, you notice Mary deep in conversation with Anne near the bow. Their body language suggests disagreement, Mary's stance rigid, Anne's gestures animated. Whatever the dispute, it ends abruptly when they notice your attention, both women turning away to separate tasks. Rackham oversees the departures personally, shaking each man's hand regardless of their choice. It's a peculiarly civilized end to their association, reflecting the democratic principles that have always been central to pirate governance. By midday, the William is lighter by 11 men and several chests of coin. Those remaining have a sense of grim purpose as they prepare to set sail for Spanish waters, a journey that will take them beyond the relative safety of the Bahamas and into more dangerous seas. Last chance to change your mind, Fletcher says, having appeared on the dock just as preparations for departure are being completed. You hadn't seen him since Nassau, hadn't known he was on Eleuthera. Thought you'd have taken the pardon by now, you reply, genuinely surprised to see him. Fletcher shrugs, considered it, but turns out most honest captains don't want former pirates on their crew, pardon or no. Limited options for men like us. There's something in his manner, a nervous energy, eyes that don't quite meet yours, that raises your suspicions. What brings you to Eleuthera, specifically? Fletcher's answer is cut off by a shout from the William. Sails, multiple vessels approaching from the north. You turn to look and your blood runs cold. 3 ships are visible on the horizon, their silhouettes unmistakably military. Sleek sloops designed for hunting pirates, moving with the coordinated precision that comes from naval training. Royal Navy, you breathe, the realization hitting like a physical blow. Fletcher's discomfort now makes terrible sense. "I'm sorry," he mutters, already backing away. The bounty, £500 for Rackham. Betrayal. Fletcher has sold out his former comrades for the price on Rackham's head. The knowledge burns, but there's no time for retribution. You sprint back to the William where chaos has erupted. "Cut the anchor cable," Rackham is shouting. "All hands to sails. We can outrun them if we catch the offshore wind." The crew works with desperate efficiency, knowing what capture means. The William begins to move, sluggishly at first, then with increasing speed as her sails catch the afternoon breeze. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seems escape might be possible. The pirate sloop is lighter and more manoeuvrable than the Navy vessels, and Rackham knows these waters intimately. Then fate intervenes. The wind shifts, suddenly and catastrophically, swinging around to blow directly from the south, exactly the direction of your intended escape. The William's sails go slack, then fill again with pathetic slowness as Rackham orders a desperate tack. "We can't outrun them now," Mary states flatly from beside you. "Not against this wind." Anne appears on your other side, her face set in grim determination. "Then we fight." The decision ripples through the crew, not by vote this time, but by the unspoken understanding that there are no good options left. The William's 10 small cannons are readied, swivel guns loaded with grape shot, cutlasses and pistols distributed. "We're outnumbered 3-1, you feel compelled to point out as you prepare your station. "Wouldn't be the first time," Mary replies with a tight smile. "Besides, they'll want to take us alive if possible. Prize money's better for live pirates." It's cold comfort as the Navy sloops bear down on your position. Their approach is textbook naval tactics. One vessel directly pursuing, the other 2 spreading out to cut off escape routes. Whoever commands them knows their business. "Hold fire until they're in range," Rackham orders, standing tall on the quarterdeck. For all his flaws, in this moment he embodies the pirate captain perfectly, defiant to the last, unwilling to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. The leading Navy sloop closes to within cannon range. A puff of smoke erupts from her bow, and seconds later, a ball splashes harmlessly in the water beside the William, a warning shot offering a chance to surrender. Rackham's response is unequivocal. "Fire," he commands, and the William's starboard guns roar in defiance. The battle that follows is brief but fierce. The William manages to damage one Navy sloop's rigging with a lucky shot, temporarily taking her out of the fight. But the other two press the attack relentlessly, their superior firepower gradually wearing down the pirate vessel's resistance. Throughout the engagement, Anne and Mary fight with distinction, moving from gun to gun, rallying the crew, firing with deadly accuracy when targets present themselves. There's a wild energy to them, as if they're determined to make this last stand worthy of the legends they'll become. The end comes not with a dramatic explosion or a heroic last charge, but with the grinding inevitability of mathematics. The William, outnumbered and outgunned, simply cannot inflict damage fast enough to overcome her attackers. When British Marines finally swarm aboard, barely half the pirate crew remains standing to resist them. What happens next enters pirate lore as one of its most ignominious chapters. While Anne and Mary fight on, standing back to back on the quarterdeck and repelling multiple attackers, Rackham and most of the surviving crew surrender with barely a struggle. Whether broken by the overwhelming odds or simply accepting the inevitable, the contrast between the women's fierce resistance and the men's capitulation could not be more stark. "Cowards," Anne screams at her lover as he's led away in chains. "If you'd fought like a man, you wouldn't be hanged like a dog." Her words echo across the blood-spattered deck, ensuring that whatever else history remembers of Calico Jack Rackham, his surrender while his women continued fighting will forever taint his legacy. In the end, even Anne and Mary are overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Disarmed and bound, they stand defiant as the British captain approaches. It's only then that Mary's true gender is revealed to the broader world, her cap knocked away in the struggle, her bindings emphasizing what her loose clothing had concealed. "What devilry is this?" the British captain demands, confronted with not one but two female pirates among his captives. "No devilry," Mary answers, straightforward even in defeat. "Just women doing what men lacked the stomach for." The British are scandalized, fascinated, and ultimately vindictive in their treatment of these anomalies. The survivors, yourself included, are chained in the hold of the largest Navy sloop for transport to Jamaica, where the Crown's justice awaits. The journey passes in miserable conditions, dark, cramped, with minimal food and water. The only blessing is that Anne and Mary are kept separate from the male prisoners, sparing them some of the indignities that might otherwise have befallen them. Jamaica, when you finally arrive, is a stark contrast to the wild freedom of Nassau or the untamed beauty of Eleuthera. Spanish Town, the island's capital, is a rigidly organised colonial outpost where British authority is absolute and unquestioned. The trial is a formality, its outcome predetermined. Calico Jack Rackham, Anne Bonny, Mary Red and the surviving crew of the William are all convicted of piracy, a capital offence. The sentence is death by hanging, to be carried out within the month. It's in the aftermath of this verdict that the most extraordinary twist occurs. Called back before the court for final sentencing, Anne and Mary deliver a bombshell that temporarily stays their execution. "My lord," Anne addresses the judge with unexpected formality, "I plead my belly." "As do I," Mary adds, standing straight-backed beside her companion. The archaic legal phrase, declaring pregnancy, invokes one of the few protections afforded to women under British law. A pregnant woman cannot be executed until after giving birth, lest an innocent life be taken along with the guilty. The judge, visibly annoyed at this complication, orders an examination by a jury of matrons. Their conclusion, delivered the next day, confirms both women's claims. The executions of Anne Bonny and Mary Read are stayed indefinitely, while Rackham and the male crew members remain scheduled to hang. The night before Rackham's execution, Anne is permitted a brief visit to his cell, a rare concession granted perhaps out of morbid curiosity by the authorities. What passes between them, none can say with certainty. Some accounts claim she berated him again for his cowardice, others that they shared a tender farewell despite all that had occurred. What is known is Anne's reported last words to the man she had once loved enough to abandon society for. "I'm sorry to see you here, but if you had fought like a man, you need not hang like a dog." The following dawn, Calico Jack Rackham and his crew are led to the gallows at Gallows Point, a narrow spit of land outside Port Royal, where pirates have been executed for generations. The spectacle draws a substantial crowd, executions being one of the few public entertainments available in colonial Jamaica. From your own cell, awaiting your turn at the noose, you can hear the distant cheers as each man drops. Rackham, given the privilege of dying last as befits a captain, reportedly faces his end with unexpected dignity. His final request for a drink of rum is granted, after which he is reported to have said, "Well, I've had a short life and a merry one." The fate of Anne Bonny and Mary Read diverges from that of their male counterparts in ways both merciful and tragic. Mary, whose health had been declining since her capture, succumbs to a fever in prison sometime in April 1721. Whether her pregnancy was genuine or a clever legal maneuver is never definitively established, as no child is recorded in the prison's ledgers. Anne's ultimate fate remains one of pirate history's most tantalizing mysteries. Records show she remained in prison past Mary's death, but no execution is ever documented. The most plausible accounts suggest her wealthy father eventually secured her release through bribes and influence, spiriting her away to start a new life in the American colonies under a different name. As for you, the sentence is commuted at the last moment, your status as a pressed man rather than a volunteer weighing in your favour. Instead of the noose, you face transportation to the British colony of Georgia, where indentured labour awaits. It's not freedom, but it's life. The last you see of Anne Bonny is through the barred window of a prison cart as you're led away from Spanish Town. She stands at the window of her own cell, one hand resting protectively over her belly, the other raised slightly in what might be farewell or might simply be adjusting her position. Her expression gives nothing away, neither defeat nor defiance, simply the quiet determination that had characterized her from the first moment you saw her in that Nassau tavern. With her passing from your sight, a chapter closes, not just in your own life, but in the history of piracy itself. The golden age is ending, its great figures one by one removed from the stage, Blackbeard dead and decapitated, Rackham hanged, Mary Read claimed by prison fever, Anne Bonny vanished into historical ambiguity. In the years to come, as you serve your sentence in Georgia and eventually gain your freedom, you'll hear occasional rumours of other pirate captains meeting similar fates. Bartholomew Roberts killed in battle, Stay de Bonnet hanged in Charleston, Charles Vane executed in Jamaica. One by one, the lights go out until the wild freedom that once defined the Caribbean gives way to the orderly commerce of empire. The pirate republic is no more, not just defeated but replaced, its very memory gradually transforming from recent threat to distant legend. But legends, as Edward Teach knew all too well, have a power all their own, and in the stories told in taverns and around campfires, on ships and in port towns throughout the world, the golden age of piracy will live on long after its actual demise, embellished, romanticized, but never entirely forgotten. Charleston, South Carolina, 1732. 14 years since you last felt the roll of a ship beneath your feet. 10 years since your indenture in Georgia ended, allowing you to establish yourself as a modest shipwright in this growing colonial port. The calluses on your hands now come from honest work rather than hauling lines or manning guns. Papa, tell me the pirate story again. Your son tugs at your sleeve as you sit on the porch of your small home overlooking the harbour. At 8 years old, Thomas is obsessed with tales of high seas adventure, particularly those featuring the legendary Blackbeard. Your wife Sarah appears in the doorway drying her hands on her apron. Not those dreadful stories again, she sighs, though there's more fondness than censure in her tone. You'll give him nightmares. No, I won't, Thomas protests. I want to hear about the burning beard and the blockade and the 20 wounds. You can't help but smile. Already, barely a decade after the events themselves, the truth is being transformed into legend. The numbers grow with each retelling. Blackbeard's wounds multiplying, his crew expanding, his treasure becoming more vast and mysterious. Go on then, Sarah relents, settling beside you on the bench. But the true version this time, not the tavern tales. The true version, you agree, though even you sometimes struggle to separate what you witnessed from what you've heard in the years since. Memory is a tricky thing, especially when reality itself was so extraordinary. Thomas settles at your feet, eyes wide with anticipation. Did you really see Blackbeard's ghost ship? No, lad, that's just sailors' talk. But I did serve aboard his flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge. And was his beard really on fire? Not exactly on fire. He wove slow-burning matches into it, like fuses, you know? The smoke made him look like a devil rising from hell itself. Your son shivers deliciously at this image. And did he really bury treasure all over the islands? This question makes you laugh. That's the strangest part of all the stories they tell now. In all my years among pirates, I never once saw anyone bury treasure. Why would they? The whole point was to spend it. Sarah leans forward, genuinely curious despite herself. Then what did they do with their plunder? Spent it in port, quickly too, on drink and women and fine clothes. Pirates weren't much for saving, you chuckle, remembering the wild spending sprees in Nassau whenever a crew returned with prizes. Most pirates died poor no matter how much they stole in their careers. Thomas looks disappointed by this mundane reality. Like most children his age, and increasingly many adults as well, he prefers the embellished version currently spreading through popular imagination. Tales of buried chests on desert islands, of maps marked with X's, of ghostly ships and cursed gold. But what about Anne Bonny? Sarah asks softly. This part of the story has always fascinated her most, the women who defied convention so completely. Ah, Anne, you gaze out at the harbour, remembering the fierce-eyed barmaid who became one of history's most notorious female pirates. No one knows for certain. She vanished from the Spanish town prison sometime in 1721 or 1722. No record of execution, no record of release. Some say she returned to Charlestown, Sarah adds, using the old name for your adopted home. That her father, William Cormac, was a wealthy merchant here who paid for her freedom. You nod. I've heard that tale. also heard she went to Virginia or back to her native island, or that she found another ship and continued pirating under a new name. I like to think she's out there somewhere, Sarah says, surprising you with the hint of wistfulness in her voice. Your proper colonial wife secretly romanticizing a pirate woman's freedom. And the treasure? Thomas interrupts, returning to his favourite topic. Blackbeard's treasure? If Teach had any great store of treasure, he kept it secret even from his crew, you tell him honestly. Most likely whatever hadn't been spent was lost when Queen Anne's revenge ran aground. This historical truth rarely satisfies anyone these days. In taverns across the colonies, you've heard the growing legends that Blackbeard amassed a vast hoard, that he buried it somewhere along the Carolina coast or on a remote island, that it remains undiscovered to this day. People need these myths, you've come to realize. They need to believe that untold riches await discovery, that freedom and fortune might still be obtained through one lucky find. The mundane reality that most pirates lived brief, violent lives of relative poverty, punctuated by brief extravagance, serves no one's dreams. Mr. Harrison to see you, sir. Your housemaid interrupts these reflections, gesturing toward a well-dressed gentleman waiting at your garden gate. Send him in, Martha, you reply, curious about this unexpected visitor. Benjamin Harrison is a local printer and bookseller, a cultured man with connections to London publishing houses. As he approaches, he carries a leather portfolio under one arm with an air of barely contained excitement. Forgive the intrusion, Harrison begins after introductions and pleasantries are exchanged. But I've received something from London that I thought might interest you, given your former associations. He opens the portfolio and withdraws a freshly printed book, its binding still stiff with newness. The title page reads, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates by Captain Charles Johnson. It's just been published, Harrison explains, handling the volume with reverence. The talk of London, they say, the first complete account of the late pirate troubles in these waters. You accept the book, your heart quickening despite yourself. Flipping through the pages, you find chapter headings dedicated to familiar names. Teach, Bonnet, Rackham, Vane. There are even sections on Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the female pirates, as the author styles them. I thought, given your expertise in shipbuilding and your rumoured experiences during that period, you might offer an assessment of its accuracy, Harrison continues diplomatically. Your past is an open secret in Charleston, not advertised, but known to those who care to investigate. I'd be happy to review it, you agree, already engrossed in the chapter on Blackbeard. The account is surprisingly detailed, matching much of what you witnessed personally. Other sections, however, seem heavily embellished, particularly the dialogue attributed to pirates, long dead. I should warn you, Harrison adds as he prepares to leave. There's considerable debate about this Captain Johnson. Some suggest he may be Daniel Defoe writing under a pseudonym. Defoe? The man who wrote Robinson Crusoe? Harrison nods. The very same. He has a novelist's touch, you'll notice. The facts are generally sound from what I've heard, but arranged for maximum dramatic effect. After he departs, you settle back with the book. Sarah reading over your shoulder while Thomas plays nearby. The sun sets over Charleston Harbour, painting the water gold and crimson as you lose yourself in this printed version of your own past. Much of it aligns with your experiences, the democratic nature of pirate crews, the articles they lived by, the hardships of life at sea. Other elements have already begun transforming into myth. Blackbeard's fearsome appearance is exaggerated beyond even his own careful cultivations. Stade Bonnet becomes more hapless, Anne Bonny more vicious, Mary Red more noble. "Listen to this," you tell Sarah, finding the passage about Anne's last words to Rackham. "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog. That part, at least, is true to what I heard." "What do you think happened to her?" Sarah asks, her fingers tracing the engraved illustration of Anne and Mary standing boldly on a pirate deck, dressed in men's clothing but unmistakably feminine in the artist's rendering. "If I had to guess, her father's money and connections got her released quietly, on condition she leave the Caribbean forever. She was nobly born after all, despite her choices. And the child she was carrying? Rackham's child?" You shrug. "No record of a birth in the prison. Either she lost it, or it was born in secret and raised elsewhere," Sarah finishes, the romantic in her preferring this version. "Perhaps in Charlestown," you suggest with a small smile. "There are many children here with mysterious origins." The comment earns you a playful swat from your wife. "Don't start that rumour. We've respectability to maintain now." Respectability. Such a foreign concept to the men and women you once sailed with. Blackbeard deliberately cultivated terror instead. Anne Bonny rejected female respectability entirely. Even Stade Bonnet abandoned a respectable plantation owner's life for the freedom of piracy. That night, after Thomas is asleep and Sarah has retired, you remain on the porch with a lantern, continuing to read Johnson's history. The chapter on Mary Read particularly captures your attention. Johnson portrays her sympathetically, a woman forced by circumstance to disguise herself as a man, finding in that disguise a freedom unattainable to her as a woman. The account of her death rings true to what you'd heard. Fever taking her in prison before she could face the gallows. A small mercy, perhaps. At least she died as herself, her true identity acknowledged, rather than as the fiction she'd lived for so many years. Reading on, you're struck by how rapidly the world has changed since those wild days in Nassau. The Pirate Republic lasted barely 3 years, from 1716 to 1718, before Woodes Rogers arrived with his pardons and gallows. The great pirate captains, Teach, Rackham, Vane, Bonnet, were all dead by 1721. The golden age of piracy, so-called, burned bright but brief. Yet here, barely a decade later, those events are already being mythologized in print. Johnson's history, whatever its accuracies or inventions, will likely define how future generations understand that period. The messy, complex reality you lived through is being transformed into something cleaner, more narrative, with clear heroes and villains. Even the pirates' deaths are being rewritten. Johnson describes Blackbeard's final battle in terms Homer might have used for a Greek hero, outnumbered but defiant, fighting to the last breath, his body riddled with wounds, yet somehow continuing to battle until finally overcome. The reality, as Hans described it to you aboard the William, was likely less poetic but no less impressive. 20 wounds and 5 pistol shots, perhaps exaggerated in number, but the essence remains true. Teach died as he lived, violently and dramatically, securing his legend with his final actions. A knock at your garden gate interrupts these reflections. It's well past midnight, an unusual hour for visitors. Cautiously, you approach, lantern held high. "Who's there?" you call, one hand instinctively reaching for the knife you no longer carry. "An old friend," comes the response, the voice vaguely familiar despite the years. The figure that steps into your lantern light is weathered by time and hardship, but unmistakable nonetheless. Fletcher, the man who betrayed Rackham's crew to the authorities, who sold out his comrades for bounty money. "You have some nerve," you say coldly, "showing your face here." Fletcher raises his hands in a placating gesture. Not here for trouble, just passing through, heard you'd settled here, thought you might want news. What news could you possibly have that would interest me? News of Anne Bonny. Despite yourself, your interest is piqued. Anne's been dead or vanished for a decade. Fletcher shakes his head. Not dead and not as vanished as most believe. You study him skeptically. Fletcher was always a man with angles, always working some scheme or another, but there's something in his expression now, a sincerity unusual for him, or perhaps just the mellowing effect of age. Come inside, you decide, but quietly. My family's sleeping. In your small parlour, Fletcher looks out of place, his seafarer's clothes worn but practical, his skin tanned to leather by years under tropical suns. He declines rum but accepts water, drinking deeply before speaking. I saw her, he says simply, in Havana 3 years ago. Cuba? That's Spanish territory? Fletcher nods. Precisely why it's perfect, beyond British jurisdiction. And you're certain it was her? As certain as I can be. Older, of course, hair streaked with grey, but those eyes, he shakes his head. You don't forget eyes like Anne Bonny's. What was she doing in Havana? Living quietly, married, if you can believe it, to a local merchant, respectable on the surface, at least. The image is difficult to reconcile with the fierce woman you knew, the pirate who fought more bravely than most men, who cursed Rackham for his cowardice as he was led to the gallows. Did you speak with her? You ask. Fletcher's expression turns rueful. Tried to. She pretended not to recognize me at first. Then, when I persisted, she drew a knife so quickly I barely saw it move. Told me if I valued my life, I'd forget I ever saw her. That, at least, sounds like the Anne Bonny you remember. Why tell me this? You ask, suspicion returning. What's your angle, Fletcher? No angle. Just thought you'd want to know. You were always decent to her, respectful when most weren't. There's something he's not saying, something beyond simple goodwill. But before you can press further, Fletcher rises to leave. One more thing, he says at your door. She had a child with her, a girl about 10 years old, had Rackham's eyes. With that parting revelation, he disappears into the Charleston night, leaving you with more questions than answers. Is Anne truly alive in Havana? Is Rackham's child, the pregnancy that stayed her execution, living as a respectable merchant's daughter, unaware of her mother's notorious past? You may never know for certain. Like so much about the golden age of piracy, the truth blurs increasingly with legend as the years pass. The following afternoon, you find yourself at Charleston Harbour, watching ships arrive and depart. Your respectable life as a shipwright is comfortable, secure. Everything piracy was not. Yet sometimes, on days like this, you feel the old pull of the sea, the siren call of horizons unknown. A naval vessel is anchored in the harbour, HMS Scarborough, a powerful frigate that would have sent pirates scurrying for cover in the old days. Now it represents the unquestioned authority of empire, the final victory of order over the chaos that once reigned in these waters. Near the docks, you notice a small crowd gathered around a street performer, a grizzled old sailor spinning tales of pirate adventures for pennies. Moving closer, you listen as he describes Blackbeard's fearsome appearance, complete with burning matches in his beard. And when they finally cornered him at Ocracoke, the old salt declares dramatically, it took 20 men to bring him down, and he'd already killed 10 with his bare hands. The crowd gasps appreciatively at this blatant exaggeration. The real number was impressive enough. Did the legend really need such embellishment? Yet you say nothing, dropping a penny in the man's cup before moving on. Let them have their myths, the reality, the cramped foul-smelling quarters, the constant hunger and thirst, the terror of naval pursuit, the brutal deaths would make for less entertaining street theatre. That evening, you finish reading Johnson's history, including his reflections on why the golden age of piracy flourished and why it ultimately failed. His conclusions align largely with your own experiences, that piracy arose from specific historical conditions that no longer exist. The War of Spanish Succession created thousands of trained privateers who suddenly found themselves unemployed when peace was declared. Nassau provided a perfect base of operations, ungoverned and strategically located. The wealth flowing from Spanish colonies offered tempting targets. And the harsh conditions aboard naval and merchant vessels made the relative freedom of pirate life appealing to many sailors. But those conditions changed. Naval power increased, merchant ships became better armed, governors like Woodes Rogers transformed former pirate havens into orderly colonies. The economics shifted, making the risk-to-reward calculation of piracy increasingly unfavorable, and yet, despite its practical extinction, piracy lives on in the popular imagination, not as the desperate, brutal business it was, but as something romantic, exciting, even noble in its own way. As Thomas drifts off to sleep that night, he whispers, "Papa, when I grow up, I want to be a pirate like Blackbeard." You smile in the darkness. There are no more pirates, lad, not real ones, anyway. Then I'll be the first new one, he mumbles sleepily. With a ship and a crew and buried treasure? Buried. His voice trails off as slumber claims him, his dreams undoubtedly filled with adventures on the high seas, with fearsome captains and hidden gold and all the exciting elements that have already overshadowed the complex, often ugly reality. Let him dream, you think. Reality will assert itself soon enough. Later, alone with your thoughts, you wonder about the others who survived that tumultuous period. Israel Hands, who reportedly received a pardon after Blackbeard's death and disappeared into obscurity. Charles Vane, executed in 1721, defiant to the last. Stade Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, whose education didn't save him from the gallows in Charleston. And Anne Bonny, if Fletcher's account is true, living quietly in Spanish Cuba, her wild past buried beneath a veneer of respectability. Is she happy in that life? Does she ever stand at the harbour, as you do, watching ships and remembering the brief, fierce freedom she once knew? Some nights, when the wind blows from the east and carries the salt tang of the open ocean, do her hands remember the feel of a ship's wheel, a cutlass, the rough hemp of rigging? Does she tell her daughter bedtime stories of adventure and daring, carefully edited to exclude her own role? You'll likely never know. The golden age of piracy has passed into history, its brief candle extinguished by the inexorable advance of empire and order. What remains are legends, growing taller with each passing year, each retelling. Blackbeard's beard will burn ever brighter in the stories. The number of his wounds will multiply. His treasure will grow more vast and mysterious. Anne Bonny and Mary Red will become larger than life. Warrior women who defied convention and, in some versions, escaped justice altogether. The reality, your reality, will fade, replaced by these more satisfying myths, and perhaps that's as it should be. The pirate's life was brief, brutal, and ultimately doomed, but the idea of piracy, of freedom, of democracy in an age of monarchy, of ordinary men and women seizing control of their own destinies, that idea has proven more durable than any of the actual pirates themselves. As you drift towards sleep beside your wife in your quiet Charleston home, you find yourself not regretting this truth. Let the legends grow. Let Blackbeard's ghost haunt the Carolina coast forever. Let Anne Bonny live eternally as the fierce pirate queen who cheated the hangman. The truth had its moment, brief, glorious, terrible. Now is the time for legend, for myth, for the stories that will be told around campfires and in taverns for generations to come. Stories of the time when pirates ruled the waves, when Nassau stood as a republic of outlaws, when men and women seized freedom by force of arms and lived by their own rules, however briefly. The golden age of piracy may be over, but its golden dreams will sail on forever. Your own dreams that night are of turquoise waters and black flags, of the creak of wooden ships and the crack of canvas in the wind, of Nassau in its wild glory, of Queen Anne's revenge at full sail, of Anne Bonny standing defiant on the quarterdeck of the William. Not as they truly were, perhaps, but as they will be remembered, as they deserve to be remembered. Not just pirates, but pioneers of a sort, flawed, violent, doomed, but free in a world that offered precious little freedom to those not born to privilege. Their world has passed away, replaced by the ordered commerce of empire, but somewhere in some small corner of the human spirit the black flag still flies, and the pirate's code, crude but fair, harsh but democratic, still offers its tantalizingly simple articles. Every man has a vote. Every man has a fair share. Every man has the right to be heard. Revolutionary ideas in an age of kings. Perhaps that, more than buried treasure or burning beards, is the true legacy of the golden age of piracy, the brief, flawed glimpse of what democracy might look like, forged by outcasts and outlaws on the deck of a stolen ship. Not a bad legacy, all things